on?
He's here.
Oh, he is? Oh, like he. Okay, I don't see him. Yes. Call the meeting to order. Do we need to have a roll call or not? No, probably not. So we'll go on to part B, which is public communications. A report for oral communication form was submitted. Any public speakers?
There are no public communication requests at this time.
Okay, thank you, Yolanda. Okay, Ms. Quirk, it's all yours. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. I'm joined today with Mr. Brust, our new Director for Planning and Construction. You know, he's still shiny and bright over here, right? Very happy he's able to join us for the conversation today. And then we also have Dr. Aguirre and Dr. Salkeld joining us in addition to Ms. Hernandez and other support team from Grants and Communications. Okay. So thank you for everybody for being here today. We have a variety of things that we wanted to touch base on. Jason and I are sitting in opposite offices. He will be our Vanna for today and is going to help pull up documents as we navigate our way through this meeting. So be patient with us while we work through that part. So before we start pulling documents, just a very quick staffing update. We have been in the hunt for a third project manager for quite some time. And unfortunately, we are not getting any traction with attracting anybody to come to us. And so we are at a place right now where we will begin discussions about if we need to change what that job description looks like to open up an opportunity for somebody to move up internally and or draw somebody else to us from the outside. And knowing that we may have a little bit of growing to do with that individual, but it is somebody that we are definitely going to be needing as we continue to head into this next year. There is and you'll see it in a little bit, a significant amount of work ahead of us, and we certainly need a third body over in planning and construction because between us and also with maintenance, that we are still struggling with manpower. There will be ways for us to work around that. We do have the opportunity of utilizing CM services for temporary staff augmentation if we needed to, so we can keep things moving. But we are still on the hunt for a project manager. So if anybody out there knows anybody who's looking for a job, send them our way. Okay. I wanted to share briefly just some quick photos of some of the projects that we've completed recently. Cool. I'm not sure that everybody's had a chance. We'll just scan through them really quickly. Jason he's going to bring those up for us right now. Hopefully his computer is friendlier than it was to us yesterday. There we go. So this is Hilltop Middle School science building. On the left, hopefully you can tell that this is an older version building we did not touch versus the building on the right-hand side, which is kind of a shot of down the middle. Jason, the next one's good. This is the inside of our new science classrooms that we just completed. So there's 6 new science classrooms that look like this. Concrete floors, very simple, very clean. Next photo. Just wanted you to share, this is kind of what a good standard for our future science classrooms would look like, and quite frankly, just a standard classroom as well, in terms of some of the elements that are included within that. Next, this monster, and it is a monster, is the pool. It is the beginning of the outline of the perimeter of the pool and everything that comes with it. And so that's a very close-up photo. I apologize for that, but just want to let you have a screenshot of that. And the next one behind that, I believe, is the building. You can see the magnitude of the changing room, the restrooms, concession, storage facility that comes with the pool facility itself, and the site work that's involved. So sharing those. This here is Bonita Vista High School. You can see behind in the background, there's 2 huge light poles that are set up. The bleachers are in place. The press box is there. There's asphalt around the perimeter of the track. The grading, actually, then one of the next photos is going to show you the turf. It's down. We are starting to frame the restroom concession building. I appreciate whoever just sent that heart out. Thank you, Dr. Adansivia. It's fun to drive by this almost every day and see new elements coming. Perimeter fence is going up right on 8th Street. We've cleaned up trees. There's more tree cleaning coming. The marquees are going into place. It's really starting to take on a life of itself. So, Mr. Tarantino.
Yeah, Janae, I was just going to ask, how come there's 3 marquees? Why do they need 3 marquees?
No, the old one's going away.
Okay, all right.
So that
Okay.
they kind of, it's just a coordination issue. So
Okay.
the old one will be taken away. I think Armando has shared like next week or the week after.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And then this is the footprint for the building that's being framed right now for the restroom concession. You can see how it's going to line up right with the south end of that parking lot. So lots of good, exciting stuff happening over at Bonita. This little tiny baby is the restroom or the concession building at Sioux High. Mr. Tarantino, you're probably familiar. It probably feels like elements of that stadium have been going on since you started as a board member. I think it's literally considered phase 5, and this will be our final phase. It's moving along. There's not a lot to it, but it's being tucked in on the north side, west corner of that stadium. It'll thread to the restrooms that are currently there and get cleaned up and provide them with that concession, and we'll be able to finally close that multi-phased project. Okay, so just wanted to share some of that with you as we're moving through our conversation today to let you see some of the work that we have been accomplishing, and as we continue to talk about some of the stuff ahead of us. Along with that, Jason is going to pull up in a second. We're working hard on our marketing, right? And talking about the things that we're doing. And so it's very simple, but we've created this document, and we're asking the project managers to be completing it on a weekly basis. We're doing this for each of the active projects that we have in place. Like that right there, you can see a better photo of Bonita Vista's field right there. Like how beautiful is that with that green turf down? And these are also, so these will go onto our website for planning and construction, and then they're also being shared with grants and communications, so they can be pushing out sound bites on projects and photographs, and keeping respective communities and as a whole updated and apprised of the progress that we're making on our projects. So we just wanted to share this with you so you can see what that looks like, and if there's any feedback or anything else you'd like us to add, just let us know today or any other time moving forward. Okay.
No, it looks great. It absolutely looks great. Nice job. Nice
We're
job.
excited. It's good
Yeah.
stuff. Okay, excellent. I see a hand raised, but I can't see. Let me go to people. Who it is? Dr. Aguirre. There he is.
Hi, Janae. I just was wondering about estimated timeline, and while I know that these are still preliminary, just to to give our trustees and the public an idea of when they can expect to have these facilities available for use, even if it's, again, a rough estimate, just to have an idea.
Are you talking on this specific to this document, or are you talking about in general, Dr. Aguirre?
The projects that you just presented.
Okay.
So the track and field, Bonita, the pool, and the concession.
Yes. So there's a couple of things, and that's a great question. Thank you for touching on that really quickly. So East Lakes, let's start with them. East Lake Stadium and Title IX softball is completed, with the exception of the fact that the grass is now growing and for 90 days. Once we have that done at softball, then we'll be able to have a little ribbon cutting. So that one is essentially done with construction. We're closing the books. Hilltop Middle is closed. Bonita, the stadium, the field itself, we are looking at being able to turn over to students at the end of September, very beginning of October. We are finally, unfortunately, truly experiencing delay in materials. Those little chips that you keep hearing about from a technology perspective, they are unavailable, and they impact things like our sound systems and things like that. So we are not able to get the chips that are associated to the sound systems at the stadium for Bonita. They're saying sometime into November, potentially December. We also have some elements of the building, which is a little bit on us. We will do specify something different in the future, but that also is on a significant delay. We're also starting to hear and see delays with concrete. Byram Davey, the contractor for Bonita Vista, they're literally kind of swapping concrete out amongst their projects. Like they ordered something for one project, but they're ready to support for us, and so they're kind of swapping amongst their own projects. So full project, all elements right now for Bonita is looking more like December. We are working on a plan to turn over the field access for practices to students significantly before that. And then we're also, Armando, Mr. Mario, and Mr. Brusser working on compiling information of what it would take for us to rent portable restrooms, if they set up temporary concessions, so we can get all that information and those cost implications to figure out the pros and cons of, do they host their football games on site for this season, or are they off site for one more season and then we bring everybody back in all its glory for the following football season. We likely will be able to navigate pretty much any other sport once that field opens, but we are dealing with some delays on that project. I'll come right back to you in just a second, Ms. Dodd and Cedia. And then for the pool project, we're still on schedule, crossing all fingers and toes. We're still on the trajectory for that to be done late October into November, with turning over a facility in September, or I'm sorry, in January for that project. We are not getting any indicators at this time that there's delay or anything else like that. There's some other things that are starting to pop up that we're starting to deal with on that project, but nothing that's unreasonable or untenable at this point. And then the Sioux High concession building, I mean, that'll be done by the end of September. Dr. Adencibia.
My question is this: I want to make sure that what would be. I would think that we would be able to host games even without the chips. I mean, what is, or the concession?
So there's a couple things that also come with that, because not only just the chips, but it also impacts the fire alarm system.
Ooh,
And yeah.
Okay.
So all of it's very unfortunately interconnected. So we're working through that. And one of the things that we're asking for the team is not just the cost for us if we rented nice portable restrooms and did, pop-up concessions, but is there any element to where the inspector, the DSA inspector would sign off and allow us to do a certain number of spectators and that sort of, so that's all information we're trying to gather so we can figure out the heads and tails on that.
Yeah, because it almost doesn't make sense to put it off for next year if the actual field is workable, the lights are workable. That's one of the things I would find really difficult.
No, I think there is definitely a path for students to have access to the field for practices, for PE, for those purposes. Right. It's a matter of what rules or parameters will be put on us with regards to access to the bleachers and bigger events. So more to come on that, but we are having to navigate through that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, so then we've shared the project but a marketing sheet with you, and thank you, Dr. Aguirre, for that prompt on timelines. And we're going to transition right now. We have been working on developing, I'm going to turn it over to Jason. He's going to start sharing his screen with you again. We've been working on a budget development document. And the intention of the document is so that we can track the life of a project from inception all the way through completion. And so this baby's been in work for a while, and it's been great. Jason's been able to finalize this document and flesh it out with his team. So he's going to walk you through the document and we want to share it with you so you can see part of what our process is and how we are holding ourselves accountable and tracking project dollars through the life of the work that's ahead of us. Okay, it's all yours, Jason.
Thank you, Ms. Quirk. Also, just so you know, I'm not able to see the participants as I'm sharing my screen, so if anyone has a question, please feel free to speak up. As Ms. Quirk said, this is a document that really the intent is to capture all of the costs that are associated with projects. We call it the project budget development sheet. And the important aspect of this is to have a document which you can see the costs in their entirety over time. So on the left-hand side, we have costs as well as funding. On the right, as we move across to the right, is what those costs and funding do over time. So the first step in any project is securing funding. So that is the upper section here, and this indicates in detail where funding is coming for a project. And this particular example that I'm sharing on the screen now is an example from San Ysidro High School ROTC portable project. So up in the upper left-hand corner here, it identifies the project and the funding sources, where all those dollars are coming from. As we move down the sheet here, the first place that we come to is an estimation for site costs. Those are typically costs associated with maybe the purchase of property, and more normally and more likely things like relocation of classrooms, if somebody is displaced, if a classroom is displaced, just the materials needed to relocate them temporarily. The next section are costs associated with the design. This section includes architect fees, engineering, plan check fees, water fees, all of those fees and things, costs associated with the actual design of the project. And we start out with the preliminary number, and then as it moves over time, we watch to see that those costs are kept in line, and we can monitor those and make adjustments as needed. As we move down here, we have pre-construction consultants. These are the folks that take a look at the existing conditions, things like geotechnical, civil surveys, topographic mapping, and they gather the information in preparation for the design. Provide that to the architect, and that helps to define the scope of the project. The next section is the actual hard construction costs. That is the bright yellow highlighted line that you see going across the center of the screen. And that starts out preliminarily with, after the programming phase, what the architect's estimate is for the project. And then as we move into the programming phase, here, those costs are then further refined as the design becomes more refined. Contained within this, we also have a construction contingency. I think everyone here is aware that one of the things that you can count on is that there will be things in a construction project that come up that maybe weren't entirely expected. So we have a plan for that. Also in here, you'll see a line item for allowances. Those are those items that we know are unknowns. So we account for those things. For example, we may use them for unknown quantities of dollars needed for utility updates or things like that. We know that they're going to come up, we just don't know exactly what those dollars are. As we move down, this we labeled it construction add-ons. Really, it's depending on the project, it could contain a variety of things. It's those miscellaneous things. This example is actually a good one because it has a portable purchase. Since this project consisted of 4 new portable classrooms, this tracked the cost of the actual purchase of the portable buildings. So in this scenario, the district bought those directly so that there wasn't a markup and additional overhead that as provided by a general contractor. And then we have things like maintenance work orders and those miscellaneous items here. In the green section here, we have construction consultants. These are the folks that actually monitor the actual construction, things like geotechnical testing, material inspection, hazmat abatement monitoring, if that's applicable, as well as the general inspections, specialty inspectors, and those types of inspection services. And then lastly, we have the steel blue section here, which is the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And those are just the miscellaneous things. For example, the Hilltop Middle project, a brand new classroom receives brand new desks and furniture for students and those kind of things. And that's where these estimates and costs are captured at that time. And then once we get to the very bottom here, we have the estimated total and the budget total, and it shows us over time whether we are under budget, over budget, what changes we need to make, and how we need to make them, and the areas that we need to make them in.
Thank you, Jason. I just wanted to point out, if up in the construction section, we are assuming right now that we are budgeting for a 10% change order capacity potential. And we started forecasting for allowances. That's one area that as we've moved through projects in this last couple of years, we've realized we weren't forecasting for that properly. So when we were getting the construction, we were coming up a little short-sighted. So we've started to make some assumptions and build that in. And then just to really clarify and hit home, you can see the multiple phases of design that happen, right? So there's the main ones are schematic, design, development, construction documents. And that's what we're wanting to see, those markers as we move through the project. And then now we can also take this and start looking at different projects and seeing if there's patterns of under or over for costs and if we need to be making better assumptions. And at the bottom of this document, we're also right now running a 10% project contingency on every single project. And frankly, based off of some data that was provided to Jason and I today, you're talking like a 23% built-in contingency in our project costs. And frankly, with what's continuing to happen in the market, we still have concerns that we are not being conservative enough. But this is part of what the intention of this tool is, so we can see those things and we can very intentionally be like, wow, if things were to continue on the trend they are, then we need to be taking our project contingencies from 10 to 15% because there's so many unknown elements that are still occurring within the industry. Time, projects, the stuff I read today, it's assumed that project schedules can be delayed by 6 to 9 months, largely because of supply chain issues that are starting to impact projects. So where we thought we were already experiencing that before, we were just seeing skyrocketing costs. Now we truly are seeing that skyrocketing cost in addition to the reduction and slowdown of materials. Dr. Arancibia.
And what you just finished up on the same point. It's not just the delay. It's the volatility of the markets that I think it's just right now. It has me shaking my head. I think there's a lot of gouging going on as well, but this is one of those situations where I would argue that we move as conservatively as possible, so we don't end up with an exorbitant number at the end that might cripple us, or cripple the project.
So we're doing that, and as a reminder for both of you, when we bid Hilltop Middle School, East Lakes, even the pool, the aquatics facility, everything came in about $1.5 million to $2 million over what our estimates and forecasts were. And thankfully at the time, we had some extra money sitting over here on the side from state facilities. And so we were able to go tap into those funds to continue to support those projects. And a lot of that had to do with the immediate spike in COVID. But at that time, and I think we're still experiencing that on bid day, we're being told there's anywhere from a 25 to 40% just additional tag on to projects on bid day because contractors are saying, why not? It's a competitive enough market. And it's a way for them to just blanket cover any other costs that they really can't quantify themselves at this time. So we are continuing with the conservative approach. I think this is a great tool for us. I'm excited that we're actually able to start putting this into place, and it's really going to allow us a place to look at one page and see where we have movement happening within a project. And I really believe it's going to become a useful tool for our team in terms of how we continue to manage and move things forward. Yes, sir, Mr. Tarantino.
So will this be in addition to the M1 report when you provide the no? This is just strictly for internal 100%. Use. Okay.
Yep.
Well, I want to thank you guys for putting this together. Jason, great job. I mean, it really does lay out everything from beginning to end. And in the past we had so many problems with community members challenging us on change orders and all this other stuff. This I think really does illustrate the fact that we are keeping track and we are keeping within our bounds and we are doing what we're supposed to be doing. So great job. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. Next topic is I'm just going to share a very quick what we literally just created this. It's called a comprehensive project list. And really, I want to be able to share a screenshot with you of the magnitude of work that's in front of us. And this is not just limited to planning and construction. And this is going to become kind of a live document that myself, Mr. Bross and Mr. Malone are using as we're receiving information and work. So left column is what's in Prop O issuances A, B, and C. So all the previous and existing work that's occurring right now. And this is just projects, right? Measure DD, you'll notice, is blank for now. Everything that's on the CFD horizon, Many of the things on the CFD column are actually on our CIP. It's just a matter of us getting to a place where we can move staff to get moving on them. And there's a significant amount of work there, but the CFDs, it's really important. And I know it's a hard conversation because we have so much need in other areas, but the reality is that our CFD sites are 20 to 30 years old, and many of them have never been painted. Some of them have had their roofs finally redone, but like Rancho Del Rey needs all new roof and HVAC. It's no different than our homes, right? And so part of what you will start to see this year is some new stuff on those campuses, but also us utilizing those funds to do the deferred maintenance elements that we need to do to maintain the capital that we have. So there's a ton of work in front of us with CFDs. The Fund 25 is just a little bit of funding towards Mar Vista, so that's not a big deal. The Fund 35 right now, that's all of our state match funds that we received from the district-wide HVAC when we submitted our funding applications. So that's the money that we received back from that. That is what we utilized to start the initial design for the stadiums. But we will be getting all of that back, and then we will use those funds to identify other future projects on some of our campuses that don't have those supplemental funds, like a Fund 49. I'll pause right there. Dr. Gary has come on and has questions.
Thank you, Janae. I think it's really important. It came up at a community meeting I was at, actually over at Castle Park. But just to be really kind of transparent and clear with our communities, there was I think a misunderstanding that was clarified at that meeting where those CFD, the community facility districts, i.e. the Mello-Roos districts, those can only be utilized at the schools that receive students who generate that particular fee. And so I think there's sometimes a question about why do certain schools receive funding for facilities. And I just wanted to take a moment to pause to highlight that, because a lot of times there's a misunderstanding. And so I wanted to clarify that for Mello-Roos or community facilities districts, that funding can only be used at schools that receive students out of those households that pay that tax and that fee, whereas other facilities may not. So then on us at the district level, we try to find an equitable distribution of all resources, whether they be CFD or bond or state facilities funding or other funding. But I just want to take a moment to highlight that because it was a point of confusion. And there was a question about, well, can CFD be used for schools, other schools that, like on the west side or whatnot, that perhaps don't pay the fee? And so there's really clear rules around where that funding can go. And I just wanted to take a moment to clarify that because it is a question that comes up commonly. And I want to be as transparent and as clear as we possibly can. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you, Dr. Gary. And then I wanted to add in here, and so you see a column for maintenance, because we talk about planning and construction, everybody gets really excited about that. And I'm constantly telling Dr. Malone, you need to tell more of the story of the work that you guys are doing, because I feel like it's absent from many people's minds. And so they have a fairly robust list of projects that they will be working towards accomplishing this next year. So those are included on there. And then on the far right column is miscellaneous. And miscellaneous are things that have presented themselves to us that don't necessarily fall under the maintenance umbrella, and or if they do, they may not have the funds to support it. They're not bond, and or there's no bond dollars, and they may not qualify under CFD. So miscellaneous is kind of our definite running log. And then so we can figure out where and how we can reorganize some of this. I'm also using this as a tool to look for synergy opportunities between planning and construction and maintenance due to our limited resources. Of if there's even one or two opportunities in there for us to say, okay, let's take these things, cluster them together. This person's doing that. Let's pull these over here. This person's doing that. And so this is just kind of the beginning of that conversation, but it's allowing us to put everything on one piece of paper. We'll continue to add to this. Some of this is already on the CIP. Some things will be forthcoming on the CIP in the future. Okay. Okay. So the next up is our draft rubric. So back in 2000, I'm going to back up just for a second in order for us to move forward. Mr. Tarantino, this is a reminder for you, and Dr. Ancibia, an introduction for you. When we did our previous bond issuances in 2016 and 2018, we at the time developed a rubric to try to help us have a guide for some of our thought process. And so that's what you have in front of you. And so when we all know our next topic is going to be an impending bond sale. And so when we started talking about how we needed to move forward, it didn't make sense to try to create something new. We've been on pause. We all know why we've been on pause. So let's move back to where we were and start the conversation to move us back forward again and see if it made sense. And so Jason and I spent the time to do that. And it basically reaffirmed where we left off is still, for the most part, where we need to pick up. And so just as a reminder for this document, I'm going to walk you through it really fast. Left-hand column, we have it broken down by middle school to high school. When we did the rubrics back in 16 and 18, we did not separate them in that way. And we made a commitment to when we did it next time, right now, we would separate them. And the reason being is you can't compare a high school to a middle school, right? In terms of needs, there's no equity in that. And so we pulled that out. They're separated so you can see that. Next project or column is the site or the project. I want us to focus on the site, not the project. Because, and we'll talk about it in a few minutes, but I believe our conversation and our has shifted in terms of what we consider to be important. And we'll talk about that with you in a few minutes. We didn't put in the cost, but there's a column for estimated costs. For Prop O, it's very specific how we can utilize those dollars. And so we've left those references there. So we all know, hey, this is checking the boxes for our Prop O language. We did indicators if it's going to meet classrooms, so that's there. And then funds allocated to date, those are kind of inverted numbers. So what that means, if it's a -16, as an example, your top line is Granger. To date, over the life of Proposition O, and BB, quite frankly, Granger, as an example, has received $16 million. Okay, so all the way back from early 2000s to now, $16 million. If you compare that to the second to bottom line, which is Montgomery High School, they've received $69 million. Okay, and so that's part of what we want to be able to talk about as well a little bit. Facility lifespan is the age of the building. And then at the time we initially did this, we were looking at health and safety. And one of the driving forces in that conversation was the fact that at the time we had 260 locations in our district that did not have air conditioning. So when we initially put this together, many of those ones were actually a 5 because that was a high risk for health and safety. We obviously have done the district HVAC project, which neutralized that, and we took those all back down to 1. Accessibility is the same idea in concept. We don't have anything that's egregious and really out of line with that, so those are neutralized at 1. The facility condition index back in 2015-16, Jacobs was hired by the district to do a facility condition index assessment. And basically what that is they come in and they do a report card on every single one of our campuses on the facilities and the conditions of them. There's data in there, and there's decent data that you can use. You would then sometimes take that data and then take it to the next level and do a master plan. However, back in 2018, we kind of went a different direction and we created our own master plans reflective of the work that we were doing in front of us. So you see that for a subtotal. For this year, we also added in what we are considering our enrollment factor, right? We've begun the conversation. There's going to be a significant amount of information coming. We've received the final report, but we know we're headed, like everybody else in California, for the most part, there's a couple pockets that are not, but into declining enrollment. And so, Jason, if you can, we'll scroll down and you'll kind of see, we came up with a rubric of our own within the rubric of how we would give you a point value based off of your enrollment. So you can see enrollment factor is 0 through -25. The decline, we only did an assessment over a 5-year span. Our Davis demographic study is for a 10-year study, but we know that once we get past that year 5, we really need to sit, hold, and wait to see if those numbers continue to come to fruition. So it gets a little wonkier. So for right now, we just did a 5-year trajectory. And then once we did those two things, then it gave us the schools and how they fell in under what category from 0 to -25. And then we put those numbers up in their column to give them their enrollment factor indicator. And then qualitative measure has been the column that we used as a district to make a determination of, hey, these are two projects, they're, 3 or 4, or even if they're 30 points apart from each other in terms of the grand total. When we look at things from a district perspective, from a maintenance perspective, from a planning, construction perspective, and all the other elements that we have going on as a district, that is our option and capacity to make decisions and recommendations as staff for board to consider. And so that's what the qualitative indicator is. And then if there's any conflicts with the master plan, which there are not, for a grand total. So we went backwards to move forward. Again, what this told us was we didn't see anything really significant change. And so we're using this kind of as our roadmap to continue with the conversation of the next document that Jason's wanting to bring up, which is our draft project schedule for the general obligation bonds that we are pursuing in the early fall. So on the left, right now, all indicators are we're looking at an issuance of about $200 million. Reminder, fluid situation. Those numbers will move. They may be up or down, but right now we're trending towards 200 million. We have set aside 5% for program management costs, so that's staff costs. If we need a legal fees, any kind of other fees that we pay for, not within a project, but just program itself. And then we are running a 10% program contingency. We've had this number all over the place. We've had it at 10%, we've had it at 20%. Because we put the 23 or 20, let's call it solidly 20% contingency within the project forecasting, we finally came to a concession that we were comfortable with the 10%. So what that shows us is what our remaining dollars are to allocate for projects. So the list on the left, you'll see the 4 stadiums on there, right? We've already been released to start that design process, and we are in motion with that. So you see the Bonita Vista High, Castle Park, Chula, and Southwest High stadiums. We did this alphabetically, so it always kind of throws me off now, but the first project that you'll see is we're recommending another $19+ million to Bonita Vista High School for building and site improvements, in addition to Castle Park High School, same value for building and site improvements. Now, we know what the magnitude of the stadiums are. We're meeting next week for a refinement. We do believe that there's a reason why those 4 stadiums never happened. Each one of these campuses that are remaining have very unusual and very costly impacts that go with them. And I really, after we've been receiving that information, I think historically folks have looked at it, scratched their head and said, no, moving on, and have kind of left those. So we're going to wrap our arms around that and bring those babies across the finish line. And then going back to where we just neutralize the language for high school building and site improvements. If you go back to the rubric, it very specifically says like modernize a classroom building or modernize this. Our conversation internally, and we are completely welcoming you to that conversation and to provide us guidance in a different direction if you so desire, is that we would like to start making significant impacts on our campuses and in terms of what people see and what they experience. And we believe firmly over here that the way for us to do that is to go with new construction versus modernization. It starts to allow us to reduce building footprints because we're going vertical on campuses, and it has a broader impact in terms of the physical change that would occur on our campuses. So I leave you with that, and I'll open it up to Dr. Alden CBF.
I'm as a parent that's sent their kids to Bonita Vista Middle, I'm a little bit disappointed that Bonita Vista Middle is not there. Not that my kids will be there after 3 years, but I think that school has not ever been had anything done to it. I don't think seriously in the past 30 years, and yet I see other schools that have materials or have had major work done on their sites, listed in this project. And I'm in agreement with you that we have to rebuild instead of modernize. I think you're absolutely right. It doesn't make sense I think it becomes more expensive to modernize, in my opinion, than it is to actually just rebuild and actually, conceive the campus in a way that's a little bit more effective and efficient. But that's the one thing I see. And Bonita Vista has gotten the short shrift of much of the modernization and all the funds before. This is the first time that we've had a field. I totally agree that Castle Park should be on this list, both the high school and the middle school, because I think both need that. But I would like to say, that I really would want Bonita Vista to be on this list somehow or another. Bonita Vista Middle.
So one thing just to share informationally that is interesting is that we have a pocket of campuses that are very similar in nature for what they have or have not received. And so it's the Castle Parks, it's the Bonitas, Hilltop Middle School. Those are our 5 campuses. Hilltop High has received, there's new buildings over there, there's a new stadium, there's lots of new, but those are our 5 campuses that literally almost to the dollar have been the same. The kind of modernization that occurred under BB and a little bit under O is the same. And so there is a consistent need for those campuses. One of the conversations that we've been having, Dr. Ancibia, is do we go less with dollars and so we touch less on a campus, but we might be able to touch more campuses? Or do we go in and try to start working towards that larger, broader impact? And that conversation, it can get pulled in a couple of different directions. And so let me just walk you through really fast. The other thing we were trying to do here was to have regional representation, right? So as much north, south, east, west as possible. And this does definitely reflect that. So let me just bounce over to O really fast, and then I'll come back to Mr. Tarantino, and then we'll kind of keep the conversation going. So in O, you see the same thing. Right now we're trending towards 44 million, set aside the 5%, 10% for the program contingency, giving us about $37 million for forecasting for Prop O. Granger is the recommendation right now. I will tell you that Granger is a campus that it needs love like I think nothing else I've ever seen. It truly does. And so Granger is our recommendation for a significant impact over there. And then Mar Vista Academy. One of the other things we always try to do with some of our bond dollars is to designate some that's very specific to roof and HVAC. And so that's what you see for that 3.6 million. When we did that in the last issuance, it allowed us to get, I think, 9 to 12 rooftops throughout 3 campuses were redone. I don't know that we'll get as far in today's dollars, but that's the same intent for those funds right there. Okay, so that's my final thing. That's our project recommendation list to share with you and open up for discussion. Mr. Tarantino.
I would agree with what you said, Janaea, and what Dr. Arancibia said. I think we do need to move toward the impact, things that the public can see. I'm often told, well, we know what Southwestern is doing with their bond money because we see the buildings, we see the new drama building, we see the athletic complex that has the aquatic stadium, we see. From certain street elevations, we see the new math and science building. What are you guys doing with your money? Well, so much of our infrastructure was in tatters. There's a lot of money went toward things that aren't seen. And so I think for the public's sake, I think it's a wise move to move toward what is an impact and what they can actually see what we're doing with our bond money. And so I'm glad that you're considering that. And I'm not saying that all the infrastructure stuff should be, forgotten, because that's very important. But I do think that we need to, especially in the schools where there hasn't been much activity in terms of modernization, I think we do need to do something dramatic like that the community sees that, yes, they are being paid attention to, and that we are doing our due diligence to spread the money around as much as we can. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
And the other thing, if I could follow up on what you said, Frank, I'm in complete agreement with you. I think one of the things, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in terms of enrollment, correct? In the sense that if we do not improve the facilities, or we have something that folks can see, then the immediate impact is, well, I'll still go to an East Side school because, you know, they have better facilities than we do here, right? And then the enrollment suffers at each one of the sites on the West Side because we're not doing our due diligence. And you can't believe the number of parents that are saying that to me right now. Why would I send my kids to Castle Park Middle if I can have a chance to take them at Eastlake? The facilities are not good enough for my students, right? So my kids. So I think that's really a self-fulfilling prophecy. What we see is really what we're going to get in terms of enrollment.
Dr. Gary.
Thank you, Janine. And I just want to add from my perspective, and you know, I've been engaged more recently with the conversation out at Castle Park, but I've also been involved with conversations at Olympian when they needed a field, and I've been involved at Bonita when there was something as infrastructure oriented as HVAC and, you know, Hilltop Middle. So I think what I like to point out is that ultimately our challenge as a district is that we have a much higher degree of need than available resource to address the need. And so I think that was borne out by the Jacobs facility condition study that happened back in 2015. At that point, granted, it's already 6 or 7 years old, but the need was pegged at over $1 billion across the district. And so, you know, as Janelle mentioned, we haven't had access to some of the bond funding. So just in context, I really want to commend the work that Janelle and the team did in trying to find a sensible approach that tries to really find a degree of balance across the district. I think coupled with the CFD program, this is an equitable approach to the bond dollars. I think I really believe that the projects that Ms. Quirk and her team have put together are sound and equitable. But what I think I'm hearing is the desire to begin the kind of informing the next steps of what happens under a second bond issuance and how can we be more targeted. I think that really is where the conversation probably makes sense to go, because finding again a sensible compromise amongst our entire district, given the huge amount of need we have and the impacts of inflation hitting us. I just wanted to take a moment to commend the work of Ms. Quirk, because this is very challenging work. And again, I do believe that there's the curbside appeal aspect to this work, and parents want to have something that they can see that does bring that pride to the community. So that is an important aspect. I also want to point out that if you look at Prop DD, just as a note of information, this is approximately half of our entire bond. And we think this is a sensible and a smart, intelligent approach. But if we do another issuance at this level, we're going to, in essence, exhaust Prop DD. So what I've heard, what I've gathered in this conversation and being out at schools like Castle Park and with others, I think it's important for us to start putting together a community-based process where we bring in the community and they see the impacts, the progress we're making. And I think the fact that Ms. Quirk and her team are putting those progress reports where you see the clear kind of progress being made, and she just showed that's how this meeting started. But I do think we as a district owe it to our community to begin that conversation, because again, one more issuance of Prop DD and we're in essence going to be exhausting Prop DD. So we need to be mindful of that. Not for this year. This year's, again, we want to be in a place where we can demonstrate and provide evidence to our community that we can be responsible stewards. But then after this year, really begin that conversation in earnest, because of all that needs to happen. I just want to chime in, again, commend the work of Ms. Quirk, but also the need for that strategic thinking. And the reality is we're constrained by the resources we have. But great work, Ms. Quirk, and we welcome all the feedback.
Thank you, Dr. Gary. Dr. Gary, before you unmute, do you want to touch base on the L Street defeasance at all with this team?
Yeah, so L Street defeasance, I'll briefly touch on it. That's our efforts to, in essence, protect the general fund, because in future years, given again just what transpired in the past, the goal under that is to begin the process of planning for a long-term consolidation. Now this part is a defeasance part, so I'll ask for Ms. or Dr. Sockel to provide additional information in terms of what a defeasance means. That's a pretty technical term, but in essence, as far as kind of I'll describe it, is in essence it's for the purpose of terminating or the process of land acquisition at L Street, with the goal of consolidating district office. That will need an additional investment in the future just for the construction aspect, but then it would allow us to be able to either lease or sell some of our other district office campuses. So that's where some of the strategy pieces come in, and really with the goal of removing this as a potential future liability on the general fund. But Dr. Sockel, if I missed something, or if you can elaborate in terms of a defeasance and what the strategy is moving forward, that'd be helpful.
You know, I think Dr. Geary, you covered it and summed it up well. It's in essence what we call the debt service, or a payment that we have. It's a little over $2 million. It's currently paid out of our Fund 40, and it is connected to our general fund. So as funds get exhausted in Fund 40, our general fund would have to cover that obligation. But by us paying this off, it allows us to do that consolidation work, as Dr. Aguirre mentioned, all within the bond program.
Yeah. Now, if I may add, Dr. Sockel, one of the things we're looking at is the final state budget adoption, to see if it may offer us the ability to, in essence, complement the bond with some of the state funding that may become available. In essence, what we're trying to determine is the amount of restrictions that are placed on those funds. But Dr. Sockel?
Correct. We had put about $20 million, if you recall, for our board trustees. We had put it into the reserve. So if we, again, as those things settle, or now with the state budget, as Dr. Geary mentioned, if there is that flexibility for us to use those dollars, we will proceed with using 20 million in lieu of the 28. So that would bring this amount down and could be repurposed for other projects.
So this is basically like paying down your credit cards at a lower interest rate so that we don't have to worry about it in the future.
Exactly. And then again, that obligation that it puts against the general fund, unrestricted general fund.
Smart.
Okay, thank you. So I have a couple of other quick things to touch base on. One, right now our trajectory, through Measure DD, our second issuance, we are looking at about 36 months after the issuance in the fall. And then for Proposition O, right now, depending on how AVs continue to trend and what happens with the economy, we would be looking at consistent O issuances every 2 to 3 years after this issuance in the fall, of anywhere between, I'm just going to say 20 million to 35 million. I think that there is more potential for that to swing. So hopefully that trend continues, so we would know we have on average about $25 million coming in every 2 years for planning purposes, which is a great, pocket of money where you could go in and do some deep saturation on campuses and things like that. The other thing too is that with what we have up here right now, there's a couple of other things that could happen depending on the issuance value. If it goes up, and depending on how much it moves up, we may be able to go back to that rubric and pull other projects up above the line. Okay, and so we'll be looking at that. The other thing is that if, let's pretend Jason and I were spot on and all of our numbers are 100% right now, right? And I'm sure that's the case. And there's no unknowns that we haven't planned for or can't foresee. And that $19 million for program contingency was not needed to offset any of the projects down below. That right there is a whole other project that we will be making a determination on once we get to a certain milestone with the projects on the bottom of how we can pull that forward and move something else above the line. Because of the limitations on the value of Prop O, that doesn't give us as much slush. But we would still be looking at where we can maximize those things, any projects. The other thing that we are looking at, whether it's a combination of both of these funding sources, not so much O because of the limitations and the language, but also with potentially more money coming, what's looking like from the state and with deferred maintenance, is how are we getting out to all of our campuses and getting everybody full campus painting and just some of that curb appeal that needs to happen. Most campuses are overdue for, you know, a top to bottom paint job, marquee replacements, just some of those initial site perceptions that are out there to get a little bit of momentum moving as well. And when we do campuses, I think this is important. When we talk about doing like a Castle, well, we're already moving on painting Castle Park High School, but let's move to Granger. When we go in and we do a new building at Granger, we will also paint that entire campus within that project. So it's not going to be just that one building that looks like it's been completed. The entire campus will have an impact. Okay. So, I mean, we're doing a significant amount of work. It costs like $350,000 or less to paint a middle school. So we will take care of those things all at one time. Okay. And then the last thing, just in the interest of time, we wanted to share with you. I already kind of touched on it very briefly, but let me explain to you what that means. We have to spend, once we get an issuance, we are obligated to spend 85% of those funds within 36 months. It's a lot of work to do. And so Jason put together kind of, and this is just a sample, right? So we have all these projects that are essentially going to move at the same time. It's going to be like a race of who can get to DSA first. And for some projects, we may have to just make decisions on who gets out of DSA first. Fine, we're putting you on the street for bidding. Some others, we may have to, you know, 4 stadiums down at one time. I believe that there's a way for us to do it. We'll continue that conversation with athletics because we want to be as far on the other side of that and as successfully moving through that 36 months and that 85% burn rate as we need to be, so that we truly are in a place as a district financially to go to market for that next issuance that we very desperately need. But so this is just a snapshot of kind of what that timeline looks like for you. So we're basically already working on these projects. If you look at this schedule, right, we are currently sitting in the programming line 2 column right here. And if everything kept going through design, submission to DSA, et cetera, it takes us all the way until September of 2025 for those projects to be completed. We're going to issuance in September of 2022. That's 3 years. That's our 36 months. So we don't have a lot of time. Jason's going to be busy. Jason's going to be really busy, and we're going to have fun doing it, but we're going to be very busy. And then that doesn't even take into consideration that we're going to be running CFD projects. There's maintenance projects. There's a whole bunch of other things happening at the same time. So I think everybody is going to be earning their worth over this direction for quite some time. We're excited about it. It's a great challenge to have. We have not had the opportunity. And the other side of the projects that we're completing right now, some of those are almost legacy, right? Like Hilltop Middle has been around since before I even got into the district 7 years ago. Sioux High concessions. And so we're finally putting those to bed and stepping into what's going to be a new chapter for us. And it's going to take some time. It's going to take some patience. It's not going to check all of our boxes. I think we all can agree that there's a significant amount of need and there's not enough dollars to cover it, but we are going to start really mapping things out in terms of how we move forward. Okay. So any questions for myself or Mr. Brust? We are bringing this same list forward, the general obligation side-by-side sheet, to the board on Monday night for discussion. And what it is we're basically asking for approval of concept at that board meeting. We will still bring forward on the CIP and future board meetings the specific project name and project value. So you'll see it again, but we're basically saying, do we have your blessing to continue to proceed? Because then there's other things that we can continue to do to keep moving us on a forward trajectory. And with the successes and the timeline that we have in front of us, we want to be able to continue to do so. Okay.
And then afterwards, every board meeting, we will, in future board meetings, we'll almost have like an itemized approval that comes through, correct?
So how we bring the CIP forward, where we ask for funding for projects and we close projects? Right. At one of those board meetings, it would be after the issuance. we would come to you and say, can we have, you know, we might come to you. We may come to you depending on how things go. There's an outside chance we could come to you and say, hey, can we have $50,000 to go start the programming phase at these other campuses?
Gotcha.
There's pros and cons to that. We need to talk about where we're really comfortable. We actually already have enough stuff in front of us. I think we're going to be busy for the next what's equivalent to 8 weeks. So, you know, we have to weigh those things out, and how much we're going to try to bang our own heads against the wall versus staying focused where we are, really getting those 4 stadiums truly lifted off. We have a meeting next week with our architect. We've done a significant amount of, you've seen all those board items coming through, all the research and the investigations we've been doing. We're meeting with that team next week. So we can really say, here's the scope of your work. What are the hard challenges and the decisions we have to make? So we can understand those. And then by the end of this month, the first week of August, my intention is that we are starting our first site meetings with those sites and saying, here's, in general, the things you have no control over, right? Here's where your stadium is, here's where this is, that kind of thing. But here's where you do have some autonomy. Here's where we have restrictions from DSA in terms of path of travel. Castle Park, that's a beast. I mean, the elevation changes alone. And so we've had some good productive discussions with DSA. I think there's some good solutions in there. They're all going to be things that we are going to have to kind of work through together. And it's not going to be everybody's perfect, like, well, this is exactly what, right? There's a reasonableness in there in terms of getting where the ultimate goal is. One thing I think, and before I pick up Dr. Gear really fast on this one, is it is really important, and I want to stress this, the bleachers at a school site like a Castle Park are significant in size and capacity. That will look and feel different when we get completed with these projects. And that's going to be the case at all of the stadiums. There's triggers with DSA on fixture counts, on capacity. Many of those have been in place for so long that they are no longer in compliance with current building codes, all kinds of different elements. And so, and then there's just a whole other thing with the bleachers at Castle Park. It's actually a retaining wall, right? Yeah. So how we navigate through some of those. And so we will be very open with the school sites when we're having those conversations to help set those expectations. Where we will be experiencing that, you know, our first time out with Bonita as well. But there's a little bit of kind of understanding that needs to happen as we move forward, and education on what some of those impacts are, why we stay focused on the fact that we're delivering a brand new, beautiful field with sound systems and stadium and track and all the bells and whistles that go with that. Restrooms and concessions that actually flush, that you can walk up to, you know, there's good stuff. So, okay.
That's always helpful.
Bonus. Dr. Gary, do you have a question, comment?
Thank you, Jeanette. No, so I just wanted to kind of highlight from a broad perspective, the reason we're bringing this list forward is to allow us to continue to move down the pathway of issuing bonds. This will, once the board approves a list, that will be the list we include for purposes of issuing the bond. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that. That is the urgency behind that list. It also points out that we need to start then moving forward on the next list of projects. So I just want to point that out. And to be really clear, I think when Janea describes what we're looking at in terms of the bleachers, given the requirements, they will be smaller. And I think that's really clear for us to be transparent with our stakeholders up front. Given the different rules that have been applied or now in place compared to when the facility was built, that's why they will be smaller. So I just want to be really clear that that is that the reality that we're facing, but it will be a top-notch, state-of-the-art facility because that's what our communities deserve, and that's what we're working. So just wanted to highlight those things.
And they will be safer, honestly, than any of the ones that are currently in place. 100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Any other final questions, comments, direction, feedback for myself and Mr. Brust?
Great job as always, both of you. Thank you very much. Always very informative. You have a way of making it understandable to the people on the street like me who are constructionally challenged. And so thank you. I always appreciate all the work that you do, and listening to you, I learned so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to continuing this conversation on Monday evening.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you, everybody.
Have a good evening,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thanks again.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.